Okay, didn't know I was on a 15-minute time limit here, but each one of these is going to be 15 minutes long, so I will try to go a little bit faster now. So anyway, with the coal ash, we do get a sludge because when you have coal being burned, there's several steps and several big machines that it's put through, and when you go into your exhaust stacks, you are literally putting in other types of chemicals, and when those all mix, they are going to fall to the bottom, and then all of that kind of sludgy stuff, which is your bad components, like your sulfur, your mercury, your lead, all of that's going to fall to the bottom, and then they're mixed with water and they're sent to these huge ponds. They're called impoundments, and they can be near that coal burning power plant. So you're taking all this sludge with basically all these really harmful chemicals and storing it into this big retaining pond or impoundments, very similar to your hog waste lagoons. They're just huge places where all of this material is stored. So what can you do with coal ash? Okay, I don't know what's going on here. Let's see. Okay, so there's a slide somewhere here about what you can do with coal ash, and you can put it in storage, like long-term storage. What I found interesting is that they can put it in bowling balls, actually, because it's like, a containment for the coal ash. But most of it is used for concrete road building, that kind of thing. But most of it is stored in these huge lagoons, and the hazards then are when you have the breaching of that lagoon and the flooding of all of that wastewater into your freshwater systems that can kill marine life, contaminate drinking water, it leaches into the groundwater. And that's what happened in the Duke coal ash spill here in the Dan River in North Carolina. And I'm going to give you some information on that to read up about it, because it is really important that you understand what coal ash is, what the effects of it are when it gets out into the environment, and then now what Duke Power is doing, which is trying to relocate some of these lagoons or impoundments, places that aren't right next to freshwater systems. It's like, yeah, duh. So coal, when burned, is not very efficient. 65% is lost in power plants and 10% is lost as stray voltage along transmission lines. So you're really only having 25% efficiency here with coal. So there are some amendments and acts that the EPA and the legislature has put into place for reducing the emissions and cleaning up the emissions. The Clean Air Act is one of those acts, along with the Clean Air Amendment Act of 1990. Basically, they included things like cleaning the coal. And when you clean coal prior to combustion, you have to physically wash it, and then you apply different types of chemicals to, again, neutralize some of those more harmful toxins that can be in that coal. The big thing that you may need to know about are the scrubbers. Now, scrubbers are put inside the smokestacks. They are basically injected into these big smokestacks, and it's limestone rock, or it's ground up limestone, which is calcium carbonate. And that calcium carbonate neutralizes specifically your sulfur dioxide. And when those things chemically react, it neutralizes that sulfur dioxide, so it takes out the majority of the sulfur dioxide emissions. This has been extremely successful with reducing the acid rain problem here across America because of these mandates and moving forward with cleaner coal. This is basically what a scrubber is and how it works, where you're putting in the limestone, injecting it into your emissions smokestack, and then basically when you get your coal ash, that's that remnant of all of these toxic materials. You can actually get something called synthetic gypsum out of this, which is used for drywall. So that's something interesting that can come out of this, the drywall. Coal scrubbers, I've got a little video here of Duke Power. You can watch it or not. It's not that big of a deal. It's just watching the scrubbers in action there a little bit, and the guy's talking about them. But you can see with the graphic, again, this is where you might need to be able to interpret something on the FRQ. With the scrubbers, you'll notice before they were activated, you have a high sulfur dioxide emissions, and then it decreases significantly. Same thing with nitrogen oxide emissions. Natural gas and methane are the same thing. I want to make sure that you understand that. And with oil and natural gas, unlike coal, which was just plant material, these were made from the remains of both algae and phytoplankton, which died millions of years ago. So you have a little bit of those marine animals and also algae. There is a very interesting YouTube video here I would like you to watch. It's only 2 or 3 minutes, and it talks about the formation of oil and gas and this nice anticline here. I would like you to watch that. Hydraulic fracturing, this is how we extract natural gas now from shale rock. And you drill a well about 2 miles deep down into a specific rock called shale, and then you turn it horizontally and you put down highly pressurized water, chemicals, and sand that then break the rock into those little tiny fissures, and then the natural gas will flow back out the well. You do need to know about fracking. You do need to know a little bit about what it has done for this country. And there is a wonderful video here that I want you to watch on the pros and cons of fracking. It does tell you a little bit about it. It's about 16 minutes long. It's from 60 Minutes. Please watch it. Goes through some advantages of natural gas. It is cleaner to burn, meaning it produces half as much CO2 as coal. So it is cleaner to burn. However, it is methane, so it is more potent than carbon dioxide. So it traps more greenhouse gases. However, it only releases half as much as CO2. It's more efficient. And it provides energy independence for the United States. So that's really important because before we started fracking, we had to buy a lot of our oil from other countries, and now we have an economic boom in this country due to fracking. Disadvantages, it can be difficult to transport because not all pipelines are built yet. And it can explode when you are putting it in these big tankers because you have to liquefy it. So there's the hazard there of explosions. But more pipelines are being built around the country. It can be polluting, as you hopefully saw from the video, groundwater contamination, either from the frac fluid itself or the methane that gets into your aquifers. But the big thing that they didn't talk about that you have to know about is earthquakes. Earthquakes are being seen now across the country in places that don't typically have earthquakes. In the middle of the plate in the United States, we're in the middle of the North American plate. Places like North Dakota, South Dakota, where these very large fracking operations are occurring, they are seeing more earthquakes and larger earthquakes. And that's a problem because those types of communities aren't earthquake resistant. They don't have the preparedness and the infrastructure like other places like in California that, hey, you know you have earthquakes, so you build accordingly. And it's not for the fracking per se that creates the earthquakes. This is also something you have to understand, is it's the wells that they drill to then put all of that wastewater back into the ground. That wastewater goes back into those deep wells as a storage, and that's what's lubricating these ancient faults and creating the earthquakes. And I do have the pros and cons of fracking article that you should read up on Canvas. Oil or petroleum, same kind of thing as you're pumping it from a well, and this has increased production due to enhanced recovery, but it's still kind of the same thing where you're putting in a lot of steam, water, and chemicals to push the oil up towards the well. The problem here is that for every 3 barrels of oil we consume, we are only finding 1 barrel. So we are declining in oil because we're using it much quicker than we can find it. And so they do say that oil production will cease by 2090 and world production by 2100. Oil in the United States right now comes from Canada and Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. Those are the main exporters to us for oil. I mean, we do get a lot of it from ourselves, especially now that we are using those fracking capabilities. I really like this graphic because it talks about who consumes, or it shows us who's consuming the most oil. Obviously, the United States. We are a very small percentage of population in this world. However, we use 26% of all of the world's oil compared to like China, which is only 6%, India, which is 2.6%, and that's because we are a developed, highly industrial nation, and we consume a lot. You will need to know a little bit about the oil spills that have occurred in the past. The Exxon Valdez was a famous oil spill that happened in 1989. It was an oil tanker that was carrying about 53 million gallons of oil, and the guy crashed into the Sound and released about 11 million gallons, and that of course contaminated basically the Prince William Sound in Alaska, which is in Valdez, Alaska. And you can see here from the map where that oil kind of migrated to throughout a couple months. It damaged your fishing industry, the habitats. I mean, they had a lot of issues after this oil spill. One of the hazards, obviously, of transporting oil is the threat of this type of spill that contaminates your environment, and then can also decrease your economic situation because this was a major fishing industry then that was damaged.